All right, and finally, students, we're going to talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. That was a great song back in the 90s. Trust me, if you've never heard it, it is gold. We were talking about chapter 8, sexuality and society. So let's jump right into it. Get our thing going here. Believe it or not, society shapes patterns of sexual behavior and gives meaning to sexuality in our everyday lives. Sex refers to the biological distinction between females and males, and I'd like to always stop right here and explain. Sex, this is where it differs from gender, okay? Sex refers to your biology, okay? What you were born with. In a rough term, what's between your legs, okay? That's what sex refers to. That is not gender. We'll talk about gender in a week or two. Some differences in the body set males and females apart. They are primary sex characteristics and secondary sex characteristics, okay? Primary sex characteristics are your genitals. These are the organs used for reproduction. And once people reach puberty, they develop secondary sex characteristics. Bodily development apart from genitals that distinguishes biologically mature males and females. For example, mature females develop wider hips for giving birth, and mature males develop more muscles, deeper voices, etc. But we know all of this already. Okay, now, occasionally, there are some people who are born with both, and these are intersexual people. They're born with both female and male primary sex characteristics, some secondary as well. The old term for this is hermaphrodite. I'm sure you all have heard of that. This is very rare. Then we have transsexual people who are people who feel they are one sex, even though biologically they are another, okay? So look at that keyword again. Some respond to this feeling by undergoing gender reassignment surgery, which is surgical alteration of genitals and breasts with hormone treatment, okay? Which is why it's so important in the LGBTQIA community that you understand the difference between transsexual and transgender. As sociologists, once again, looking at the general and the particular and seeing the world through a sociological perspective, it is our responsibility to make sure that we're able to have these conversations with people in society without offending them, okay? As it relates to sexuality, there's a cultural element that is always taboo, no matter who you are, and this is incest taboo, which is a norm forbidding sexual relations or marriage between certain relatives. Now, going way back to chapter 3 in culture, I always ask the question, would this norm be a more or a folkway? Give you a minute to think about it. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. It would, for those of you who said it would be a more, you would be correct. Because remember, a more is something that is universally recognized, okay? This is universally recognized as something that you're not supposed to do. Incest taboo. Over the past century, the U.S. witnessed profound changes in sexual attitudes. This cool dude named Alfred Kinsey in 1945 was just kind of looking at everybody, seeing what they were doing, and he published a study that ushered in the sexual revolution. During this time, youth culture dominated public life. Sex drove rock and roll. If it feels good, we're going to do it. Everybody's out here sleeping with everybody. We're doing all the drugs. What a time to be alive, right? Now, there's some technology that kind of helped encourage this revolution. For example, the birth control pill prevented pregnancy and made protected sex much more convenient. If you're not having to worry about having a baby or getting sick, let's get out here and get it on, like Marvin Gaye said. The revolution had a special significance on women in that it doubled the double standard narrowed. The double standard narrowed. And what that means is You know, of course, back in the day, and even a little bit now, in current times, women are held to a certain standard as it relates to their sexuality. They're not supposed to be promiscuous, not supposed to have a lot of partners, but during the sexual revolution, that standard narrowed. So it became a little bit more relaxed, if you will, society did, on the idea that women could have as many sexual partners as they wanted to have, right? So, yay for that, right, ladies? By the 70s, however, people were beginning to criticize the freeness of sexual revolution. It's like, okay, whoa, we're doing way too much. We need to chill out. We need to slow down. And this brought about the sexual counter revolution. And what was that? I think I skipped one there. Oh, no, I didn't. It's a little further down that we can't see. Well, I'll tell you what it is. The sexual counter-revolution was basically a call for women to go back to the traditional values of the house. Get back in the kitchen, make your dinner, ladies. Stop being out here being promiscuous, things of that nature. And not just women as well. They wanted men to kind of chill out, too. And, there are probably several reasons for why that was, okay? All right, now we can move on. All right, so now we have a couple of things about sexual orientation, which is a person's romantic and emotional attraction to other people. I'm going to let you read through those. You know all about that stuff, heterosexuality, homosexuality. The one thing that I do want to touch on, because it is a part of your annotated bibliography this Sunday that's coming up, is the homophobia, which is discomfort over close personal interaction with people supposed to be thought to be gay, lesbian, or bisexual. And there's a very interesting case that I want you to research. Matthew Shepard is his name. Happened when I was a teenager, so I don't know if you guys are even familiar with him, but it's always great to kind of see some of the premier cases of the consequences of individuals who are homophobic. So make sure you research that, and I'll be interested to hear what some of your thoughts are on it once we return for a discussion. There was some issues and controversy as it related to sex. Of course, there was teen pregnancy, pornography, prostitution, and sexual violence. And we know a lot about those, but I do want to talk really briefly about prostitution. That is still controversial even today. Prostitution is the selling of sexual services. Prostitutes or sex workers fall into different categories. We first start at the top, kind of the creme de la creme, if you will, of prostitution. Those are our call girls, which are elite prostitutes that arrange their own dates. They don't necessarily have a manager. They don't have to run anything by anybody. They set up their own dates and they collect their fees as such. Then you go down a little bit to the massage parlor brothel girls. And these are prostitutes under the control of managers. Generally, when we think about these type of prostitutes, you've ever heard of a house, a brothel, if you will. And normally there's a madam of the house that kind of controls all the clients that come in. And the prostitutes are able to service their clients. And then we have the bottom of that, which is the streetwalkers, prostitutes that work the streets, usually controlled by pimps. Unfortunately, these women have no control generally over the clients that they have to service. The pimps are usually very violent. They don't let them have their own money. They're very physically, sometimes mentally, and sexually abusive to these women. Now, prostitution, even with streetwalkers, is considered a victimless crime. And I have here, why do you think that is? And I'll tell you why. Because generally the idea is that prostitutes choose this line of work and they are using this as a way to make money. So if they're making money by providing a service and the person is receiving a service and is paying, there is no victim there. Both parties are aware of what's going on. Now, certainly with the increased incidences of sex trafficking that we've seen within the last year, we know that that may not always be the case. There are lots of women now that are unfortunately being sold into this type of lifestyle, and certainly they are victims. But once again, generally speaking, outside of those parameters, prostitution is a victimless crime. So we have sex violence up here. There are two types discussed, rape and date rape. I do want to touch on date rape, which is the forcible sexual violence against women by men that they know. Men that they know, not men they don't know. Okay? Nowhere is date rape more prevalent than on college campuses. And the reason for this is, you think about big college campuses, there's a lot of parties, a lot of drinking, a lot of socializing, decisions often get made, and things happen. And most of the time when things like sexual encounters happen, if you're under the influence, you can't willingly offer consent. And it is usually with someone you know on a college campus, somebody that you took a class with or that you see in the commons area, things of that nature. Alright, so here are our theories. We haven't seen them in a while. Here they are to pop up and tell us about sexuality. If you are a structural functionalist theorist, if you like that style of theory, they believe that society depends on sexuality for reproduction. Remember, everything is functional with this guy. He's got the glasses and the suspenders, okay? It's functional. You have to have sex to reproduce, okay? That's my structural functional voice, okay? I also believe that society utilizes concepts like incest, taboo, and other norms to control society. Can't be all out here just willy-nilly having sex with one another. Gotta have some control over that stuff. Symbolic interaction theory. Our flower girl believes that sexual practice vary globally. Remember, she looks at things from a micro perspective, and depending on who you are all over the world, you may practice different sexual things. Then we have the social conflict in feminist theories. This is Angry Girl. She believes that sexuality is, of course, linked to inequality. In the U.S., women's sexuality is regulated more than men. So, once again, even though we've come a long way with that double standard as it relates to women's sexuality, it is still regulated pretty heavily by today's standards. And we talked about abortion. And that was a part of your discussion as well this week. I was, very interested in hearing what a lot of you had to say. Very proud that some of you were able to give the other side what would be your opposing opinion about abortion. It says here that originally laws banned abortion, but in 1973, of course, with Roe versus Wade, the Constitution declared that this was unconstitutional. So it split society right down the middle. You are either pro-choice, you support a woman's right to choose, or you are pro-life. You oppose abortion on moral grounds. It says here that despite many strides made towards a woman's right to control her body in this regard, abortion still remains a hot topic today. All right, that is the end of chapter 8. You now have all 4 chapters. I will leave you with this. I did give you one particular thing that I wanted you to find out for me, but aside from that, if you can give me 3 other small statements about something I've said in these videos and send them to me, that will give you extra points towards your quiz on Sunday. Okay? Hope you have a great rest of your week. I'm sorry I am tongue-tied this evening. Enjoy yourself and continue to stay safe. Thanks.